So the bosses in Paper Mario Color Splash are good, but not amazing. I mean, I like them compared to games like Sticker Star, but they aren't as good compared to games like Origami King or 1000-Year Door. So it definitely was a bit interesting, because there are definitely some boring bosses in this game, but there's definitely some good ones that I do enjoy fighting. So I got a list out for you guys, and this is including both the bosses and the mini-bosses, except for the Black Shy Guys, because, to be honest, that boss, it doesn't even feel like a mini-boss. I mean, it's a mini-boss, but you could just use 2 thing cards and it's completely dead. So in my opinion, I'm not going to count it. But other than that, let's get started on this list. But actually, before we get started, I'm less than 40 subscribers away from 1,000 subscribers, so I'd really appreciate subscribing. We're so close. And tell a Mario RPG fan as well that isn't subscribed yet to subscribe, and I really appreciate that as well. But other than that, let's get started on this list. The Big Lava Bubble. It's a mini-boss that goes down really easily. I don't know why I included it, even though I didn't include the Black Shy Guys, because basically you take this boss down with 2 ice flowers. That's it. That's all you need to do, and it's completely dead. This is when you're going for green paint stars. This is really late in the game, and you get a really easy mini-boss like this, so it is definitely pathetic in that regard. So I just don't really like this fight. It's just really boring, there's just not much to it. At least it's not annoying, but there's no annoying bosses in Color Splash to me. So in my opinion, this is the worst boss in Color Splash. I think you kind of see a pattern coming along here, that enemies that are just bigger than normal being mini-bosses are not very good in this game, and Big Spiny is no exception. But for some reason, I don't really know why I really dislike this fight. I mean, it's not terrible, but I mean, the attacks are kind of bland. I mean, it's not super easy though on your side. I mean, you don't take him out immediately. You take a decent amount of moves, but I think the main reason why that this fight is not a very good fight in my opinion is that it is on the extreme sides of bland. It's so boring to me, seriously. I mean, it has very boring attacks, and there's just nothing to it. You're just using your cards to attack him as fast as possible. There's just nothing here that's interesting. It just feels like a bigger enemy. It just feels like one of the enemies from the Mondo Woods. I mean, fighting the big Goomba. Remember that in Mondo Woods? I mean, that's basically what it feels like here. So, in my opinion, the Big Spiny fight shouldn't be a mini-boss. It's extremely boring to me, and that's why it ranks this low on this list. Our first Koopalink fight on the list, and my least favorite one, is Iggy. And the reason why Iggy is my least favorite is pretty simple. Well, there's a couple reasons. The first reason is that it is the normal formula for each Koopalink fight. You do some damage, he gets into a certain phase, and then you have to use a certain card, aka the bone thing, which, I'm not gonna lie, was pretty annoying to find, but I'll talk about that a bit later. And then you do some more damage, and you win. It was very simple and very boring. It's a terrible structure for boss fights. But speaking about the bone thing, it's not a good thing in this game, because you originally use it, and then you go back to the Ringler because you don't have it anymore, but it's apparently sold out, which is pretty irritating. But then you have to go through the entire Coliseum to find the bone thing again. It's just, I don't like it. It's just not fun to do, and I went into the Iggy fight not having the bone thing, thinking that I did, and it was just not a fun journey for me, and this is why Iggy is my least favorite Koopalink fight in Color Splash. I mean, it's not a terrible fight, it's not annoying or anything, but I just don't like it personally. So the Larry fight is also pretty boring in my eyes. I mean, there's just not much here. I mean, never mind. There is some stuff here, but it just doesn't really affect me at all. So he does send a ton of enemies at you trying to stop this Toad. And if you don't take these enemies out in one turn, then it goes right at the Toad, which I'm mixed about. Because on a good hand, it tests your ability to try to take out every single enemy in one move. The problem, though, is that if you mess up once, then the progress is just reset, and it's just kind of annoying in that regard. And in my opinion, it leans on the worst side most of the time. So that's not a great thing for this fight. And also, once that part of the fight is over, the fight is done. Just use the cork, block the chimney, and then do a ton of damage to Larry. There's just not much to it. It's very boring in my eyes, so and that is why the Larry fight is this low on the list. The Lemmy fight, where instead of using one thing for every other Koopaling fight, in this one you have to use two things. Wow, so original. I mean, to be fair, it is original to Lemmy. There's no other boss fight that requires two things. It's the only one, but that's not really the main thing about this fight. You're just dealing with enemies and then trying to damage Lemmy. There's just not really anything to this fight. It's just kind of boring. His attacks are boring. The thing cards, they're not annoying to find, so it don't really matter to me. And has the exact same concept as a Koopaling fight. So in my opinion, it's pretty boring. I mean, there's not really much to talk about for these segments. I mean, numbers 10 through 7 were basically tied in my mind. They're all Koopaling fights, they're all kind of boring, so it kind of makes sense that I just don't have much to say about Lemmy. The Morton fight is... well, it's the first boss fight in the game, which might confuse you guys because it's actually ranked right at the middle of the list. So why is it ranked this high? Well, unlike every boss we've talked about so far, this boss fight, none of my expectations were hurt. Like in the slightest. I mean, it's the first boss fight in the game, I kind of expected mediocrity, while the other boss fights he talked about, I expected more from. But this one, I didn't really expect anything, so it's the least disappointing out of the boss fights we talked about, which is why it's ranked this high. I mean, the fire hammer looks pretty cool, the fire extinguisher is pretty easy to get, so there's just not much to this fight, which is fine. It's the first boss, it introduces the formula quite well, so I guess as a first boss, it does fine. It's not a good fight, but at the very least, it's not a bad fight, or it didn't disappoint me, so at the very least, it does deserve to be number 7. So I have the weirdest opinion on this Kamek boss fight. I just don't know how to feel about it, because with the normal Kamek encounters, I don't like them, because most of the time I'm just trying to avoid the enemies, and... well, it doesn't work, because now I can't flee from Kamek, which is just... it's not good. I don't like it, it's very irritating, but with a boss fight, I guess it kind of works, because, I mean, the main reason I didn't like when Kamek came on is because I couldn't flee. But I guess the concept itself of flipping over your cards and just reducing all your cards to just 6 kind of works for a boss fight. It's definitely more interesting in that regard, because the first thing he does is flip over your cards, and he shrinks you down to mini, which means you're not going to be doing that much damage. But then after a while, he just reduces all your cards to 6, and you don't even know what they are. You don't know if you'll do enough damage, which is pretty scary, and I do like that for a boss fight, which I guess is why Kamek is number 6. It's very weird. But I guess all this kind of works for a boss fight itself instead of enemy encounters, which is why it lands in the middle of this list. We're into the top 5, we're into the actual good bosses in Color Splash. Yes, less than half of the bosses from Color Splash are genuinely good. That's kind of sad, but Sticker Star's ratio is worse, so I'll let it slide. But we're on to Petey Piranha here, the last mini-boss I'm going to be talking about. And yes, I do have a bias for this fight, mainly because my favorite boss from Sticker Star is also Petey Piranha. But there's also mainly that appeal of World 5, me basically hating World 5, and then Petey Piranha being that breath of fresh air, because it's simple. But Petey Piranha here being simple is actually its biggest problem, because there just isn't that much to this fight, which is why it's only at number 5. I mean, I like this fight, I like its attacks, which actually isn't something I've said in this video that much, if at all. And I like that if you jump on him when he's not knocked over, he'll eat you and then do a lot of damage to you. That's very nice. He does a lot of damage for the stage in the game you actually are right now, which is threatening. I do like that part. I mean, again, it's simple, which is why it's only at number 5, but at the very least, I am starting to like the attacks from the bosses now, which is always a great thing. And you don't need a thing card here, which is always going to be a plus for me. This fight really shouldn't be ranked this high, I know, but the theme is just so good. It's my favorite boss theme in Color Splash. It's a pirate theme, and it has a beat. That is a deadly combo to win me over for a theme, so it's why it's ranked this high. I mean, the battle itself is average in my opinion. I mean, I don't like collecting the thing, just like in the Iggy fight. I don't like getting the camera. It's pretty irritating because you have to do the bonus round in Sifter with it, but I didn't do it because I was scared. So it's just very annoying. I didn't like it, but I will admit that the thing card, the camera, is used creatively. You have to use it as a decoy, so in that regard, I do like it, but just getting it is kind of annoying. I like the attacks here as well, though, because she sends enemies at you, but if you block them, then you don't have to deal with it. It's a reward system if you actually can block well. So the fight itself is okay, but the theme is phenomenal, which is why it's ranked this high. The top 3, though, don't worry, the battles are actually really good, but this one, I'm sorry, I just had to rank it this high. I just couldn't control myself. The Ludwig fight is a great fight in Color Splash. Let's talk about the first phase, the Super Ludwig, and that's my favorite part about the fight, mainly because it's super unique. It has the use of tails, an item that is given to you in abundance in 4 Cobalt, the level that shows you fight Ludwig in, which means that it's not really a puzzle to really think about, like, oh, just use tails, I probably have to. So in that regard, it works pretty well, and the way you use them is super unique. You have to use the tails to knock back cannonballs that Ludwig sends to you, and that's a very unique way to actually destroy the Super Ludwig, because none of your stickers actually do damage to it. And he actually sends enemies to you as well, which I could look as a bad thing, but at the very least, what are you supposed to do with your cards? Because you're already using tails to destroy the Super Ludwig, so your cards should just be used to destroy the enemies. So in that regard, it works in my opinion. But then you get to the Submarine, and yeah, this fight starts to get worse, because you just use the balloons, which is a pretty easy thing to find, so that's a good thing at least. But then you just drag it out of the water and just use hop slippers to destroy it. And then he gets out, it explodes, and then you basically just use like a big jump or something, and he's dead. So the last 2 phases of the fight aren't that good, but the first phase is phenomenal, and it is why it is this high on the list. It's super unique, and probably the most unique fight in Color Splash. We gotta talk about my favorite Koopaling fight now. Roy is an amazing fight. It's number 2 for a reason. Mainly because, at the beginning of the fight, he takes all your paint away from you, and he takes your 1-up mushrooms away from you, which means you can't even get your paint back, which means all your colorless cards are useless. That's very scary if you have a lot of colorless cards, which I personally did, and I see that as a positive. But don't worry, Roy's a nice guy. He'll give your paint right back to you. He'll shoot it right at you with a cannon. And the cannon and the paint has a lot of weird side effects, to say the least. Like blue paint, if that gets on you, you get all depressed and you can only use blue cards. It's very weird and funny, but it's also very charming and it makes the fight very memorable and unique, which is a great thing for this fight. But then the second phase, he gets all your paint and puts it in his cannon, which makes black paint, and he sprays it all over the room. So you have to use the washing machine specifically to clean it all up. And the washing machine is a thing that you have to collect. You're forced to, or you can't progress in the game. So you're obviously going to have it, which means you're never going to miss it, unlike a fight with Wendy, where you're missing the camera. That is a very positive thing for this fight. And then the third phase, after you use the washing machine, just kill Roy. It's very simple. I love the Roy fight so much. It's very unique. It has a lot of charm. The side effects of the pain is very unique. I just love this fight so much, and it has the added challenge of removing all your pain at the beginning. The Roy fight is my favorite Koopaling fight by far. Black Paint Bowser is the quintessential Mario RPG final boss to me. It's not anything special, but it works. Everything here works. It has a good formula, even though, again, other final bosses expand on it. Here, everything works. The first phase is very simple. You have to kill black paint bubbles when you actually do damage to Bowser, because if you don't, then it'll just regen and you just lost progress. So, I like the first phase. It's very simple, though. The second phase, though, he grows huge. Of course he does. He's Bowser. And when you attack him, the black paint just regens right on him. So you have to get Huey into a normal bucket again, so he can actually absorb the black paint. That is very cool, and it's probably the best part about it. It's a very cinematic thing to do, and he has limited uses. You can only use him 10 times, or you're dead. I've never seen what happens, because You probably don't go over 5 because you have a lot of really powerful cards in this game. But the other thing I want to point out, mentioning cards, there's no use of thing cards. There's no mandatory use, which is just a great thing. That's why I hated the final boss in Sticker Star, because you had to use things to progress. But here you don't have to, which is a great thing for me. Also, I think that the final attack that Black Paint Bowser does is very cool. He just gets all of his paint, not just his black paint, all of it, and charges a huge fireball at you, which is very scary, and if you don't block it, well, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I love this fight so much. It's a great final boss, and it's my favorite boss fight in Color Splash by far. Thank you guys for watching this video. My next video will probably be another fan-voted poll. Again, if you lasted this long, please subscribe. We're less than 50 subscribers away from 1,000 subscribers, so I'd really appreciate subscribing. But other than that, G-bye.